It's a great pleasure to have you all here today at the launch of the latest 9th iteration of our Industrial Policy Action Plan. This is the Industrial Policy Action Plan that covers the current financial year, 2017 to 2018, and also the outer 2 years to 2019-2020. I want to just make it very clear, as I did last year, that the main content of our Industrial Policy Action Plan is not another vision document or another policy document, but actually is, as its name implies, an implementation plan. So in the larger volume that you have before you, the most of it is around a series of actions, time-bound actions that will have to be conducted by different entities of government to give effect to industrial policy over the time frame. So this is what IPAP is about. This is what the successive iterations of IPAP, as we call it, iterations. It is our implementation program for the period covered by the IPAP. And in that regard, every year we issue a new one covering the financial year in question and the outer 2 years. And I think it's important that we have been able to maintain the discipline of this now for 9 successive years. This is also the 10th anniversary of the adoption of the National Industrial Policy Framework, which is in fact our policy document and our framework document, which identifies the domain of possible industrial policy actions that we could deploy as South Africa, and also which makes the case for industrialization and industrial development. What we have presented this year, and we hope that this will make IPAP a little bit more accessible, is in addition to the long document, which, as I said, is the guts of it, which is explaining the specific actions that will be carried out, by when, by who. There's also the shorter document, this one, and the shorter document is an overview, and it highlights some of the achievements that we have had through our industrial policy. It also is giving a snapshot of the key themes and directions that industrial policy will follow in the period covered by the current IPAP. We hope that these two documents together, that this approach will be useful and, as I said, also perhaps more accessible to a broader audience. As always, when we're talking about implementation of our policy and its execution, we have to contend with turbulent economic and political times, so that is also covered in particular in the long document. There's quite a significant analysis of the global and domestic economic environment. Let me start off by saying, without any ambiguity, without any apology, that IPAP is intended to contribute to radical economic transformation. And let me be very clear about what we mean by that. And I want to say that at its simplest, this means that IPAP must contribute to the achievement of two components simultaneously and interconnectedly. First of all, it's got to contribute to bringing about radical change in the structure of our economy, and in particular to contribute to bringing about structural change that reduces our dependence as an economy on the industries and sectors that we were consigned to under colonialism as a producer and exporter of primary commodities. I think that we know that this is the least lucrative part of any value chain. And in fact, if you look at developments which are taking place in the global economy and in global value chains now, you will see that the value of a finished product that is constituted by the raw material that is included in it is both the most minor part of the final product and in fact is also a diminishing percentage of the value of the final product. So if we are going to, through our productive economy, if we are going to be able to move progressively and incrementally towards a future in which there is more opportunity for productive employment for more of our people, in which there is higher incomes and development of our productive forces, the first thing we've got to do is move into more value-added activities, and that means we've got to go through the path of industrialization. In our case of South Africa, we've also got to address the re-industrialization of our economy, given that we have suffered over previous decades, we have suffered some regression in the performance of manufacturing. But secondly, and simultaneously, we've got to promote greater inclusivity in our economy. We've got to promote more involvement of more South Africans, and particularly South Africans that were excluded in the past, in roles of ownership, leadership, and participation in the productive economy. Those two things have got to happen simultaneously. And so as we industrialize, it's incumbent on us to simultaneously address the question of actively working to draw more historically disadvantaged people into leadership roles within the manufacturing sector itself. And I think that we have to do this against the background of being cognizant that if we don't deliberately work in this regard, we will reproduce the existing patterns in which people who are historically disadvantaged do not play any significant role. And over time, I think we've been developing two significant policy instruments in this regard. One of those is that we have been indicating and we have started to apply a conditionality for all the incentives that we deploy, a conditionality that those who benefit from those incentives in line with the requirements of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act of 2013, that they will be required to contribute a particular level of BEE. And in particular, I think we've been looking at larger companies working around enterprise and supply development programs so that we can bring in more black-owned companies into value chains as component manufacturers, but eventually that can lead to them becoming more significant, larger companies as well. And in addition to that, we've had the focused Black Industrialists Programme. And as you know, when we launched this, we indicated that we were going to seek to support 100 black industrialists. What we have done recently is we have compressed the time frame for the support of 100 black industrialists. And so it is our current intention to support 100 black industrialists by the end of this financial year, in other words, by April next year. And I'm pleased to say that the last piece of information that I received was that we have supported 40 at this point in time. So I think that is the efforts, or among the efforts, that we are trying to promote to support inclusivity. Of course, our inclusivity also involves that we are seeking for the manufacturing sector to be a contributor to employment. The circumstances are not easy, and around the world, and this is something to do with technological changes, which I will come to in a minute, but we are also looking in particular to manufacturing as a supporter of employment and decent employment at that in our economy. And for that reason, you will see later on when I speak and in the documents that we are looking to give particular attention to the most labor-absorbing parts of manufacturing, and they include agro-processing, they include the clothing and textile industry, they include component manufacturing. And so we are giving particular emphasis to those parts of manufacturing, but also I think we are cognizant of the fact that there are high multipliers between manufacturing sectors and other parts of the economy, service industries that are related to manufacturing. And so I think that the overall theme of this IPAP, along with previous IPAPs, is that industrialization is an imperative, that we believe that we can show that our interventions in the past, our interventions on different levels, including a more developmental approach to tariff setting, a stronger defense of our borders against substandard products. They include our localization decisions. They include the industrial finance and incentive programs that we've been supporting both transversely and on a sector basis, that these have had an impact and have had a positive impact on industrial performance, but that we are not yet at the level and scale that we need to be, and that this IPAP, along with other IPAPs, is contributing to raising the scale and impact of our industrial policy interventions. Of course, we are addressing ourselves to a number of challenges that we face, challenges which are not of our making, but challenges which are impacting without doubt on the manufacturing space. And let me just mention one or two of them. That the global conditions impacting directly on manufacturing include, among other things, the global glut, or if you prefer, the current overproduction of steel products. And that this is due to structural changes taking place in other economies, as well as the relatively depressed conditions in the world economy, and that this has meant that steel industries and steel production across the globe have been threatened by the entry of low-price steel products coming from overproducing steel plants in countries where the demand for steel products has declined. And although we're not yet completely out of the woods with regard to that, I can say that we believe that there is a greater level of stability in steel manufacturing in South Africa. We have deployed a number of trade policy instruments, and we have recently signed off on a safeguard proposal, which now has also to go to the World Trade Organization. And this has gone along with a series of other conditions and measures which we are looking to safeguard steel manufacturing in South Africa, not just primary steel making, but also the downstream steel making operations, which are as critical and more critical in terms of employment than the others. So we have secured agreement that the pricing mechanism for locally produced steel will move away from import parity pricing. As I said already, we have deployed a number of tariff policy measures, and some also for downstream steel making in South Africa, so that we don't just secure upstream and then allow downstream steel makers to be vulnerable to the import of fabricated products that are benefiting from the low input of imported steel. There's financing support for downstream value-added steel product users. This was mentioned briefly by Shakil. I also am not going to announce any of the details because that will be announced by my colleague, the Minister of Economic Development. But just to say that there is a substantial program of financial support run by the IDC that will be unrolled to support downstream steel manufacturers. And this is, in our view, an indication that we are working for the benefit of the steel industry as a whole, and not for any part of it. But it is also an indication of the challenges that we face, because instead of being able to talk about increasing production and increasing opportunities in the steel value chain, we've had to be talking about addressing challenges arising from some circumstances that are not of our making. So what is to be done, and what are the key themes which will inform our work in the current iteration of IPAP? And first of all, the first focus obviously is to contribute towards higher levels of inclusive growth. And working together with the private sector, which is the way in which all of the programs are actually designed. Government must secure and support investment in a modernized and competitive manufacturing sector, and one which is also increasingly export-orientated. Investment must, wherever possible, focus on labor-intensive value chains and those that link primary and secondary sectors of the economy. And so the ones that we've been talking about that will receive special attention, I've already mentioned some of them: agro-processing, clothing and textiles, leather and footwear, component manufacturing. Component manufacturing, of course, I think we realize has got to go along with original equipment manufacturers. And so programs for automotive and for metal fabrication industries will simultaneously be advanced. And then I think it is perhaps important to say that we are working very closely with all the key stakeholders on the development of a master plan for the motor industry that will support the motor industry after the expiry of the current automotive production development program in 2020. There is a very inclusive process of discussion that is ongoing, and we hope and trust that in the course of this financial year, that work will result in us bringing into fruition a new motor program which will be able to give certainty to the automotive sector and build on the successes which we have achieved in the automotive sector up to now. Secondly, we're going to have to strengthen efforts to raise aggregate domestic demand, in particular through our localisation of public procurement. Public procurement is one of the key tools of promoting industrial policy. We have, over the last few years under IPAPs, we have introduced a number of designations, and the designations mean that all organs of state, without exception, will be required to follow practice notes issued by National Treasury, which say that certain proportions of all products as defined will have to be sourced from local manufacturers. That is a tool which is very, very important to us. I think we can point to a number of successes of our localization programs. There will be a rollout of further localization determinations, but also we will be, during the course of this year, reflecting very closely on what has worked, what is not working. How can we ensure that we have compliance and enforcement and implementation more effectively than we perhaps have had up to now of localization decisions that we have made. Thirdly, we need to step up our export effort. Our export effort, can focus on exports into a number of destinations. But in particular, I think that what is very important to us is the African continent. The African continent is not only a major market for manufactured goods, but we also know that the continent itself has got an ambition to industrialize. We welcome that and we support that, because in fact the efforts to industrialize will create larger markets, more demand, but will also mean that we will have to insert ourselves in different ways into markets on the continent. And so the DTI has established a new division which is called Invest and Trade Africa, which is looking to promote investment-led trade, trade in more intermediate products on the African continent. And this export effort is also something which we believe will be able to support the growth and development of black-owned enterprises and black industrialists, among others. And so we have a number of programs to draw in more of the black industrialists into export efforts. Fourthly, the policy speaks of, the program IPAP speaks of creating and reinforcing policy certainty and program alignment. And this means that we are seeking to secure a more streamlined interdepartmental clearinghouse to steer policy and program alignment, to deal with bottlenecks and ensure that all departments are pulling in the same direction and with the same effort in supporting industrialization. I already indicated that if there's fragmentation, if there's lack of coherence, that can reduce the impact of our efforts, and so that we will be making a significant effort, not just on localization, but on other issues, to try to promote a greater coherence over the course of this financial year. One of the things that we have been doing as well is to ensure that there is a greater effort in terms of coordination around providing a smoother process for investors through the one-stop shop Invest South Africa investment agency that has been established. The office in Chani already has representatives of a number of government departments that are relevant to an investment decision, and it has connections with all of those. That's an important part of ensuring greater coherence. Fifthly, there will be strengthened ongoing efforts to build a less concentrated and more competitive economic and manufacturing structure in which barriers to entry for new entrants are lowered. And this is the work of the Competition Commission. And I think that the big piece of work that will unfold here will be to move from the excellent work that has been done by the competition authorities to deal with abuses of dominance, which we have seen affecting a number of industries ranging from construction to the bread industry and many others in between, to move from simply dealing with matters of abuse of dominance into actually reducing dominance in the economy per se. That's the big challenge, and that's a piece of work that it will be unfolding in the course of this year. Sixthly, we are aiming to build a strong system of industrial finance and incentives to support and secure higher levels of investment in the productive sectors of the economy. One of the lessons which we have been learning ourselves is that we think that where we have specific sector-specific programs, we often make better headway than if we have generic programs. We will need and we will continue with generic programs like MSEP, but that in the course of this year, and we hope to announce in the near future, probably in the budget speech, that we will have a new specific incentive program for agro-processing. So I've already said that in the framework of the IDC and announced by the Minister of Economic Development, there will be a specific incentive program for downstream steel, and the other one that will be coming in is one for agro-processing. Seventhly, we need to push ahead with technology-intensive value-added beneficiation projects, which leverage our competitive resource endowment to secure a global competitive advantage for the production of beneficiated mineral products. IPAP 2017 sets out in a summarized manner this work, including with respect to the significant opportunities in fuel cell manufacturing. So I think that we want to convey here that we have now moved beyond simply calling for beneficiation and value addition to our mineral resources. We now actually have a number of projects in place, a number of investments in place, and they include investments in the manufacture of fuel cells in South Africa. And fuel cells, I think, is the frontier industry of the platinum group metals. Fuel cells which will be used at this stage in underground mining vehicles and in small power facilities that can be providing power to places that are remote from national grids and with an eye to a market which is not just in South Africa but also elsewhere in this continent. Eighthly, we need to optimize technology transfer and diffusion, and a greater effort working closely with the Department of Science and Technology to commercialize homegrown research and development in key sectors. In this regard, I think it's noteworthy that my colleague, the Minister of Science and Technology, Naledi Pandor, has written an introductory chapter to this particular IPAP. And innovation, I think, is ultimately where you need to arrive at if you are going to maximize the benefits of any particular value chain that you participate in. Innovation occurs in a number of ways. One of the ways is that we have research institutions that are run by, in this case in our country, largely under the Department of Science and Technology. The challenge is that we have some very, very good ideas here. The challenge is, and this is a challenge that we want to respond to in this financial year, is more effectively to commercialize the outputs that come from those institutions. But we also need to be very aware that much of research and development occurs through continuous improvement, through enterprises working closely with their workers, with their production-based employees, to identify improvements that can be taking place in their productive capabilities, and very often those innovations, small as they may seem at first, they lead to massive changes. That has been the model that many successful industrializing countries have come to. And in this year's IPAP, we include a chapter on water and sanitation and more efficiency in the use of water and waste management for industrial development. And we think that there are opportunities here that will support industrial development. And I want to thank and make special mention of Mr. Desigan Naidu of the Water Research Council for the work that they've been doing to make possible a special chapter this year on water in our IPAP. Ninthly, we need to support further strengthening of energy efficient production and carbon mitigation measures in a manner that allows for sustainable adaptation of energy intensive sectors in the economy. And what is important here, I think, is to recognize that increasingly energy efficiency and lower carbon footprint are going to be critical elements of competitiveness. And it's going to be important if we're going to be stronger export players, that we are going to be able to demonstrate that this is happening in our industrial enterprises. And so the work of the National Cleaner Production sector deserves special mention in this regard, and it's critical that we in fact do follow a path of industrializing and at the same time of demonstrating that we are becoming more energy efficient and less carbon emitting. I think those are critical elements that have to be built into our industrial platform. Tenthly and finally, we need to ensure that the foreseeable effects of the fourth industrial revolution are understood, and that we proactively adapt South Africa's productive sectors to meet the challenges. This is something which was a key theme at the World Economic Forum Africa meeting, which we just had in eThekwini last week, and there's a key theme that has been emerging in the World Economic Forum for some years. We're going into an age in which we are seeing, and there's an outline in the IPAP of a number of technologies. They include things like 3D printing, the Internet of Things, they include robotics, they include artificial intelligence and stuff like that, which are all associated with what's called the fourth industrial revolution. And I think the importance of the fourth industrial revolution is that it is seen as having what are called disruptive effects on production, production in all sectors, including manufacturing, but not limited to manufacturing. We'll also have disruptive effects in many, many service sectors. Disruptive effects which could contribute to a major increase in output and a major contribution to human welfare and to development, and also allow probably more entrance or easier entry into production activities for smaller industries and smaller enterprises, but which at the same time probably mean that the technological literacy that is required of entrance into industrial jobs is going to be raised. And I think that these are some of the challenges that we are going to have to cope with. And what this IPAP will be identifying is that over the course of this financial year, we develop a series of proactive action plans so that South Africa can beneficially insert itself into this fourth industrial revolution, which is inescapable and which will have implications for all of us. By way of ending, I want to just say that I believe that IPAP is a critical and indispensable component of our collective efforts to promote economic growth and development in South Africa, to contribute to the National Development Plan, and to contribute also to our efforts, as I said earlier, of promoting radical economic transformation. It is the product of multi-stakeholder engagements. It seeks to build stronger bridges between government, business and labour. It has a strong ethical compass and vision, which is firmly fixed on a future economy in South Africa, which is stronger, more robust, further up the value chain, and more inclusive than we find ourselves in at the moment. In conclusion, I would like to just thank a number of people who have contributed to this. First of all, my colleagues in Cabinet and all of those departments that are working with us on IPAP. I keep saying that IPAP is not the program and policy of the Department of Trade and Industry. It is the collective effort of government to promote industrialization in our country. We want to also talk to thank the many public servants across government departments and institutions who've not only contributed to this IPAP, but on a daily basis go about the difficult task of implementing our industrial policy action plans. And I think I want to single out here Garth Strachan and the team in IDD, who are the leaders, coordinators of this process. Also those with whom we work in tertiary research institutions, and then in particular to our social partners in labour, in business, the many thousands of companies, some of which are profiled in the IPAP. You will see the ones we've been working with, and who are continuously working with us, and without whom we could not develop a credible industrial policy. It is ultimately about the work that government will have to do, but government is trying to facilitate, support and encourage efforts by private companies and create an environment in which private companies can contribute to the further, deeper and more inclusive industrialization in our country. So let me stop there and hope that you will have an opportunity to look through the IPAP itself, because I think that what I've said is just a very general sketch of what's in it. The details are in particular in the larger part of it, which tells us what's going to be happening by whom and by when, and then the shorter document which gives a flavour of the various points which I tried to summarize in my report. So let me stop there. Thank you very much.